Hi, Professor Buckhoff. So, thanks for your time and your consideration that you such a great chance to listen to these new videos. So, I think it's a brilliant idea that since there's a lot of time and we need to be more comfortable. So, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Since I went to your class last time, I really thought your class is very interesting and that you make the blackboard like some kind of instrument that's...
Okay, so you visited my TOEFL preparation course over at California State University, San Bernardino, if I remember, maybe a week or so ago.
Very interesting and wonderful. So let's begin our interview. So my first question is, what's your belief about writing? I know your student population may be the ESL students, so do you have any standards or principles for the ESL students that make them be a good writer?
Yeah, to help answer your question there is, over at our program in the American Culture and Language program, part of the belief I think regarding writing is, in any intensive English program, there needs to be a curriculum. And different instructors, we meet and we decide on what our objectives are for the different levels of the students. So over the summer, I taught an academic writing class in the American Culture and Language program. And what we were trying to do with that particular group was to help get them ready for graduate studies, so they would get used to the kinds of writing assignments that would be expected in a graduate type setting. But at the same time, part of my belief is to help students, actually both native and non-native speakers alike, to improve their critical thinking abilities, I think, when they're reading. And then they can also do better and write more thoughtful essays. But my overall belief is that writing can be learned. It's hard work. It's an arduous process. But if my ESL students complete their assignments, if they do them over a period of a few weeks and they do a lot of workshopping in class with each other and with me, they can put together a fairly well-organized draft.
Oh, they're writing a will, like something like that. So that's my first question. And my second question is, what kind of texts or materials do you prefer to use in your class? Like native figures or drawings or something like that. What materials do you prefer to use?
Okay, good question. I am kind of a hybrid type instructor. I like to use a combination of online type materials and also textbook materials. So together, my students can really solve a lot of their language problems. For example, even in a writing class, I may notice when I'm working with my students that they have some grammar problems they need to solve. They might have some vocabulary problems. Even some reading problems with maybe they have a little bit slower reading speed. So I have online materials that can address all of those things. So in class, we focus more on completing our writing and through a series of workshops and class discussions and even pair discussions. But students can also work online to work on some of those other areas of their English language development, even pronunciation. I mean, when I was in my writing class in the summer, I noticed there were 3 of my students had a lot of intelligibility issues. It was very difficult to understand what they're saying. So I recommended that they go online to work on my pronunciation materials so they could work on improving their intelligibility. So I think it's a combination of textbooks and also online materials to help my students. That would be my answer to that question.
And are the students suitable for this classes, or mostly what would you do with this material, like maybe read it or Can you send me the textbook?
Okay, so to answer that is part of what I like to do with my materials, with my textbook with writing, for example. I usually have assigned readings. The graduate book I was using, I can't remember the name right now offhand, but maybe let me look at it here. Hold on a minute. See if I can find the syllabus for this. Hold on a minute. Let's see. Oh, that's not it. Hold on a second. Yeah, I can't remember. All right, let's get back. I can't remember the name of that book right now, and I can't find it. But anyway, the book, it has a series, has a few things in it, and here's how I use it. The book schedules, one is more of a guided research project that my students worked on, and the actual readings that they need to use for the research project, they're found in the back of the book. So the students don't have to go out and find their own research. The second project that's assigned in the book, it's focused more on it's focused on what's called a unguided or independent type research project where they do work on finding their own research on their own. So that particular book kind of guides them through completing those two projects. It also has with the readings, I like to spend time discussing the readings in the back of the book. We may take an hour and just look at one of the readings and talk about what the writer's thesis is, how we know. We'll go through the article and look at the support the writer's providing to support that thesis or argument that's being made. We'll even spend some time looking at the writer's style and any other important things to help us understand more about how to express our own ideas in writing using what we call appropriate academic language. So that would be how I would use that book. So sometimes we'll discuss reading assignments. Other times we'll use it to help us complete research projects. And in other parts of the book, it has some very useful areas like how to write summaries or academic responses, using quoting and paraphrasing and summarizing, into the writing. So during some of those lessons, I'll assign my students to read those chapters, and then they along with maybe a few other students in the class, they'll actually present an oral presentation, teaching the class, helping other students understand what's going on.
And the third question is, what do you think your role is when you teach them writing? Like maybe you consider you as a teaching instructor, writing instructor, or teaching learning assistants, or a tutor, or teacher. So what role?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think my role changes sometimes depending on the purpose of the class. So, sometimes I'll look at myself as the ESL instructor, where I'll bring up an idea, we'll talk about it, I'll present the information. But then when they're working on their pair or group or class discussion type things, I become more of a guide or a facilitator where they contribute more to the learning. So I don't see it as being what's called an exclusively teacher-centered type class, and in other cases it's a student-centered type class in terms of learning. So even in some cases I might be a coach. For example, if some students are recording some pronunciation practice files online and then they submit that to me and they want me to take a look at their pronunciation, I'll try to encourage them, coach them, motivate them. I'll try to tell them what they're doing well and maybe what they're having problems with, and be as polite and respectful as possible, but to keep them encouraged to want to be better. So I guess you could look at my role as being a whole bunch of different types of things, beginning with an ESL instructor, and maybe in other cases, with, depending on the type of group discussions we're having, maybe more of a facilitator or a guide, and those kinds of things.
So do you prefer to use like active and another question in this is, do you think your role will be changed during your teaching? Like maybe at the first beginning you may consider yourself as a teacher.
Yeah, I think it will. I think I just answered that. So yes, it does change sometimes.
And next, you may consider yourself as learning assistant. I really want to know, what do you think about this question? The role or identity about this writing instruction. So, thank you. And the next question is, what's your beliefs about ESL students? So, like, I know you're a professor, so you may teach a lot of students, maybe native speakers and ESL students. So, your teaching experience, what kind of students you may prefer to teach, ESL students or native speakers? So.
Okay, so to answer that question, I enjoy teaching both types of students, the ESL and the native speaker students. So I find it actually very rewarding to teach both groups.
Like, I know they may have huge differences between them, so do you think you should use different teaching methods to maybe different kind of students?
There are some different methods. I'll give you one specific example. When I'm teaching my international students whose first language is not English, usually I like to do a lot of question answer with both native and non-native speaker students alike. And the whole purpose sometimes with question answer type classes is to give students a chance to put language together to think. And with my international students, one particular thing I have to do is I need a longer response time, Anqi. What that means is when I ask a question, I might need to wait 30 or 40 seconds before someone responds, and usually I need to choose somebody specifically by name. Sometimes in my non-native speaker classes, someone will answer without me having to choose someone specifically, but in my international classes, sometimes I have to choose someone specifically before anybody will answer at all, because they're a little bit scared. They're not quite comfortable with their speaking abilities. So that would be, I think, a difference. And other times in my ESL classes, sometimes I'll have maybe 2 or 3 students who have really strong speaking abilities, and they have a tendency to try to dominate the class. So I have to be careful that there's not any 2 or 3 students that are always answering all the questions. I want to try to give everybody a chance, each class, to try to respond meaningfully to the questions that are being posed. So that would be maybe a difference.
Native speakers, what methods, teaching methods do they prefer to use? So I really need to want to know what you're thinking about this.
So I would say if you compare the two, there's some interesting things in terms of teaching and working through things. I've also found, Anqi, that when I'm taking my students through workshops, even my native speakers, they need several different workshops, including self-assessment, middle draft peer review, and even editing workshops before their paper's ready, I think, to be in a final draft. So I don't think there's any major differences between what happens with my native and my non-native speaker students in terms of workshopping and then trying to get their essays clean enough, polished enough, free of the grammar errors and organized and developed to the point where it's ready to be scored by me. So it takes time. So I think both groups of students face a lot of challenges with their grammar. And believe it or not, a lot of my native speakers, they have just as many problems with their grammar than my international students do. So I found that a lot of my students have those kinds of problems. Now, one thing that might be unique to my international students is they don't have as much of a knowledge of American culture than my native speaker counterpart writers in my composition classes. So sometimes we have to discuss the cultural elements of things a little bit more when we're doing writing assignments and things, and that usually helps my international students better manage the writing assignments that they're working on.
That's true. So thank you so much, and have a good day. So, thank you.
All right. Well, I hope that I've given you some responses, some good responses to some of your questions, Anqi, and thank you for your questions and for the interview today. And good luck in your graduate class. Hopefully you've gotten some good information that you can use to work on the project that you're working on right now. And also, thank you for visiting my class. I appreciated you coming.